Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Luke and I on the Phillies. Now officially brought to you by In the Clutch, the only place to get your favorite team's gear: t-shirts, hoodies, headbands, including a custom-made headband by Liam Castellanos with, Nick, Marsh, Harper, Stott, all drawn on the headband. They've got all of it in the clutch. Use code Arcaini Luke at checkout for 10% off. I am Luke Arcaini, one of the co-hosts, usually with Sean Brace, but the last few weeks we've kind of been bouncing around different people from the Gambler. But I know a fellow sicko that loves baseball and advanced stats and MLB Futures. So I thought there was no better time to bring Mark Henry Jr. back on the show. Mark, how are you?
I'm doing good. I had a day off today, so I was able to kind of dive deep on some college basketball futures to lock in on some, and then on some MLB futures. It's a little weird with Blake Snell, Cody Bellinger, Jordan Montgomery, Matt Chapman, maybe some other guys I'm not even naming, but just all sitting out there. It feels like you almost have to factor it in a little bit, figuring out what teams are likely to at least get one of them. But besides that, I'm ready for this to go. It feels like they do have to figure this out, though.
Yeah, it's kind of like just turned into such a weird waiting game now. That it's at first I thought it was one of them doesn't want to sign first because they want more money than the other, which has now turned into both of them kind of look like idiots. And there's 32 days till opening day, and they're still not on a team. Those guys being Cody Bellinger, Blake Snell, and Jordan Montgomery, the big three right now.
Matt Chapman too, or am I wrong?
Matt Chapman, Chapman as well. Yeah. But so those really four guys right now are basically teamless with just about a month to go. I couldn't tell you the last time four big names like that have still been on the market this late. Obviously, Harper was kind of a later signing in the offseason, the year he signed with the Phillies, but not this late. So we are going to dive into some futures here first, but I do want to kind of just grasp how you're feeling right now. We're 4 or 5 days in the spring training. Some content starting to come out. We're seeing guys kind of throwing some bullpens, some pitches. We've seen some angles of, Ryan Kerkering stuff in the new year. How are you feeling about the Phils? I mean, we can say roster and just kind of in general right now.
I feel better about the Phillies every time I look at the rest of the NL. That's kind of where I'm at. Every time I look at the middle of the NL and what that's shaping up to look like, I feel better about the fact that the Phillies undeniably have a top 4 roster in the NL and pretty undeniably a top 10 roster in baseball. It's not a top 7, 8 roster in baseball. I think they probably have the 3rd best roster in the NL. And, it's a shame that the Braves definitely have the 1st or 2nd and that we have to deal with that. But yeah, I mean, I wish they would have obviously done a little bit more this offseason to excite us. Even just something as simple as bringing in a Hector Neris type would have been nice. Whit Merrifield is a nice pickup, but yeah, I'm definitely feeling ready. By the way, I just looked it up out of curiosity. Nick Castellanos signed on March 22nd, which it feels like that was so much earlier than that.
Well, that was the lockout, correct?
So 2022 was that the lockout?
That was the lockout off season, I think.
And then
so I believe Bryce, the season started a little later, right?
Yeah, I think you're right. And then Bryce was February 28th, which
so Bryce, I mean,
right around now, yeah. And that was also one of those things where we kind of knew
earlier than that. Why did I think Bryce was earlier than that? I don't know.
Yeah, this time feels later for some reason.
Yeah,
I do think Manfred's right, by the way. Manfred, a guy who I know takes a lot of crap from everybody. He's right that they're going to have to figure out some way to contain this like free agency to 1 to 2 weeks. It's something that helps the league. It's something that, if you have 1 to 2 weeks on the calendar in the off season where people have to pay attention and talk about the hot stove the same way that they do around the deadline, that it's kind of like one of the tent poles of the MLB season is the deadline. Like you kind of gear up for that week before, that 2 weeks before, and talk about the hot stove and talk about all the guys that are available, who's a buyer, who's a seller. If you could do that again in the offseason, it would just be good for baseball to be a part of the national conversation in a way that it really only gets to be, opening day, the deadline, and then the playoffs, and maybe sometimes the chase for the playoffs at the end of the year, depending on who's involved. It's just, I know that it's never going to fly with the players union, but it's something they have to do.
No, it's because it's just going to be another, restriction on the players that I think we saw 2 off seasons ago, that these players don't like having restrictions on them. Granted, I wouldn't either if I was a player, but I also don't think anybody should be signing going into the month of March with, 3 weeks left before opening day. But with that being said, let's jump on over to some futures, which is kind of the whole reason we're here tonight. We kind of look today. I know you said you had off, so you kind of took some time today looking at mainly some over-unders on win totals, but we do have some player awards as well. I know me and John Jansen were talking about some player props a few weeks ago, and we had some ideas on team over-unders, but I want to kind of go down this list here that we have. So right off the bat, we both have Dodgers. Dodgers over 103.5 wins. That is the highest number on the board. The Dodgers and the Braves are the only 2 teams in baseball with a number over 100. So we're both kind of on that over there. I mean, I can get your thoughts on it, but I think that's just probably partially because they're probably going to be the best regular season team on paper and probably out on the field.
Yeah, I mean, they could lose like 3 or 4 guys and they'd have the team that won 100 games last year. I mean, it is astounding how good this team is, and it doesn't mean they're going to go and win the NL or go and win the World Series. The playoffs are a different animal, but I don't see any way that this team isn't dominant in the regular season. For the last 5 years, they've won 106 plus games, or at least when I always say that the strike shortened year, I just count the win percentage and I extrapolate that to 162. But for the last 5 years, they would have won 106 plus games. Looking at their win percentage, 5 of the last 7 years, 104 plus games. Even last year, which was a down year, that they were clearly gearing up to go and sign some dudes, Otani, Yamamoto, other guys, obviously. They were clearly gearing up for that last year and not spending quite as much money as they had in years past. They still won 100 games. I mean, this is a team that suffered through just a rash of pitching injuries last year and still were able to do that, mainly throwing like 3/5 of their rotation as just like kind of guys they picked up throughout the year or minor league guys that they brought up throughout the year. I think the Dodgers are going to be just a machine.
Yeah. I mean, anytime you put right. And I think with the whole Otani thing now, obviously he won't be pitching this year. But I mean, you put Otani on that team, right? That's gonna win you probably 5 or 6 more games than you did last year. So that seems like kind of an easy one, even though that number is really high. I mean, they could be maybe close to 110. I think they're gonna have a pretty unbelievable regular season. Granted, none of that matters once you get to the playoffs, but for our sake, I guess all of that matters. So next team here, we both do have the over, or we do at least do like the over, is the Diamondbacks. 83.5. I thought that number was kind of low for a team that went to the World Series last year, and 2, I thought had a pretty good offseason. They got Eduardo Rodriguez into their rotation. They added Jock Peterson. I think two pretty big ones there, and they still have Zach Gallen going out and throwing every 5 days. I think if the guy that you have winning NL MVP plays to the MVP, I think they're going to cruise over this total. I mean, I think where's your head at there? Because that's kind of where I'm at. Is I think if you get the season that you think from Corbin Carroll, then I think this is a really low number for them.
Yeah, I don't get the number. I think it should be up, upper 80s. They won 84 last year with a young team that I expect to continue getting better, a lot of which at least. And Corbin Carroll, I expect to keep getting better. I mean, Brandon Pfaadt was terrible in the regular season, had a couple good weeks to end the year, and then was great in the playoffs down the stretch. And obviously he was a big-time prospect. I expect him to kind of keep it going. And now he has to be the 4 instead of the 3 because they brought in Eduardo Rodriguez. They did a lot of moves this offseason with guys I just specifically really like. Like Eduardo Rodriguez has always been a guy I've liked to bet on. Really, I mean, what a number 3 to add there behind Gallen and Kelly. That's just an awesome rotation, especially when you have Fott right there at 4, and then number 5 is kind of up for grabs. But they added Jock Peterson, who's a guy that I've wanted the Phillies to add for his entire career. I love that guy. I think he adds much needed pop. If there was anything that Arizona needed in that offense, it's a little bit of power, which Jock Peterson and Eugenio Suarez are like perfect for. Eugenio Suarez, another guy I've always really liked for fantasy. Like just a lot of guys even Randall Grishik's a guy I've always liked who they added as a piece on the bench. Like they just have a lot of dudes. They're really solid. They're also, if you just ranked the units for the NL in offense, starting pitching and rotation, they're probably like top 5 in each of them, if not top 4 in each of those units. Like the bullpen, they've got 5 guys that are like probably top 50 relievers in baseball. So I just think Arizona is going to be like a 90-91 win team. I think they're a lock for the playoffs.
Yeah. Making them probably. So that'll be interesting. That'll be a close. If you think 90, then that'll probably put the Phillies and the Diamondbacks in a pretty close one spot chase for the wild card there.
Yeah, I had the Phillies at 92 wins and the Diamondbacks at 90. So I would have them facing off in the 4-5 in the first round of the playoffs, which would give us all nightmares. By the way, my pick in the NL would probably be the Phillies or the Braves or the Dodgers, but I will say Diamondbacks 40-1 to win the World Series for a team that went to the World Series last year, a team that just got all those pieces I just mentioned, kept all the guys that were instrumental in that run. I mean, really the only guy that they really lost is like Tommy Pham. I just think and they replaced him with Jock. It's like the exact same. I prefer Jock for sure.
Remember when Jock was a Philly for like 6 hours?
Oh, don't get me started. Those were great.
When he posted the Fanatic with Dancing on My Own.
Those are a great 6 hours.
And everyone thought Jock Peterson was a Philly.
What a troll. I've always wanted him so badly on the Phils. He's just a guy that I think that we would fall in love with as a fan base. I think he would be hilarious. Yeah, Praz, my guy Praz from Twitter has a couple comments here. Marky Snakes with the D-Box Love You popped up. Top 2 faves are Judge and Soto. Yeah, we'll talk about AL MVP for sure. He mentioned Corey Seager as his mention. We'll definitely get into that for sure. But yeah, I'm all over the D-backs, and I mean we'll talk about that with my player awards as well.
Yeah. Next team, really, I don't think we have any more of the same overs. I have the Astros. I can run down my other 3 right now. Astros, I'm just going to continue to bet their over on wins like until they prove that they're not a good baseball team. That's just kind of where I'm at with the Astros. Like I feel like they're just going to find ways to win games every single year. Their lineup is great. Their pitching is great. And that usually wins you a lot of games. They're going to find their way back to the top. I think they're going to win the AL West this year.
They're my pick to win the World Series.
Yeah.
As of right now, obviously the Yankees adding Snell, that could factor in a little bit if they do. If the Dodgers had another piece, you never want to count that out. If the Braves add another piece, maybe if the Phillies go out and add another piece, maybe that could change. But as of right now, if I had to make a pick, it would be the Astros. Yeah, the Astros are the Chiefs of baseball. That's a great
Here's
comparison.
A hypothetical for you. If the Phillies were to go sign one of Jordan Montgomery or Blake Snell, would they be your bet to win the World Series?
They wouldn't be the best roster, but I would probably pick them just because I think having Nola Wheeler and one of those guys would just be so deadly if you could get to a playoff series. I don't think any team in the MLB would have a 3 that you could put with that. Now, there's a lot of teams that could say that. If you add Snell or Montgomery to a lot of teams' top 2, you could say that. Like if you're the Yankees, you could say, if Carlos Rodon, and I will say, like this is just a tangent. People are talking about Carlos Rodon like he's like a lost cause at this point. It's like he was like a top 5 pitcher like in 2022.
Yeah,
and like
last
a top
year
10
seemed just like kind of injury mixed with like mechanical stuff. Like
I think he's gonna be fine.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he'll be back to what he was in San Fran, but I mean, maybe he could be, right? But I don't. maybe.
But yeah, I'm just saying there's a lot of teams like that could say, like, if you add Snell to their top 2, you'd feel like there's no one else that can compete with it. But yeah, I really do think, we've seen the team compete in the playoffs. We've seen the team win in the playoffs. If you added a guy like Snell or Montgomery to the number 3 and Rangers now you're number 4, like that's just a crazy top 4.
Yeah. My next team was the Orioles. I just think the Orioles are going to be good again. I think they're fun. They're young. They're good. I think Adley, as we can see, we'll touch it later. I love those odds for Adley to get that MVP, 25-1. I think that's a good chance to take on a player who is just only going to get better every single year that he plays. Orioles for me right now, 89.5. They're kind of in the same boat as the Phillies. For me, as long as they don't get off to a bad start, I think they'll cruise over the number. I think the Orioles could be closer to 100 wins than 90 when it's all said and done. I think they're just a really good baseball team. I think they're fun, and I think they're starting to really get this core right now that I think they know is kind of going to be there for a long time, especially if Jackson Holiday is up at any point this season. They're going to have a sick middle infield for the next 10, 15 years. And then my last team is the Phillies, over 89.5. I have the Phillies at 93 wins this season. I think something they're stressing this offseason is getting off to a hotter start. And I think having Bryce for the full season, not having Kyle Schwarber hit like 0.05 in the first 2 months of the year. If this team could just get off and play 500 baseball the first 2 months of the year, just 500. They don't even have to go 20 games over 500. If they can simply just play 500 baseball up until June, I think they're going to get this number pretty easy. 93, 94 wins. I mean, they've been flirting around the 90 mark for the last few years, and they were like 11 games under 500 at one point last season. So really for me, the Phillies, Orioles, and Astros, that's my main 3 on the overs other than the ones that we've agreed on.
Well, yeah, I mean, with all the struggles that the Phillies had last year, they must have finished with what, like 83 wins, 84 wins, right? Oh, no, they finished with 90. Exactly. Like everyone, the way that people talk about last year, it still drives me nuts. Like they got hot in the playoffs. There was 4 teams in baseball that won more games than the Phillies.
They were from June to October. They were a consensus top 5 team in baseball. Like they weren't just some team. 2022, they were a team that got hot. That they were a team that snuck in, got hot, whatever. Last year, they were a consensus top 5 team in baseball all season.
But even that with 2022, once you got out of the 25 and 35 or wherever it was, they were the best team in baseball from that time forward. Yeah. And that's a pretty long stretch. Like for like 100-game stretch, they were either the best or the second best team in baseball that year. So yeah, I think the Phillies should win 93 games. I think like it is funny how much I'm just ignoring the fact like the first 3/4 of the year, Trey Turner, or whatever you want to say, the first half of the year, Trey Turner last year. I'm pretending that guy doesn't exist. I think Trey Turner is just going to be Trey Turner. I actually think his MVP odds are like worth taking a sniff at plus 1,600. But I fully expect Trey to be Trey, Bryce Harper to be full-on power version of Bryce Harper. It's not going to be a guy who misses the first 2 months and then doesn't have power for a month or two after that until after the All-Star break. So I think you're getting MVP Bryce all year long this year, which, JT Realmuto just found a hole in his swing apparently. Yeah. I think
that would be big for them. I've said the last 3 weeks multiple times, the offense goes when JT goes. Like they play the best, and if that's truly a hole that they found, then this lineup's gonna be good.
Yeah, really good. And then there's the propaganda today about Schwarber. They're like, we think he can hit 265 again, like because he did a couple years ago. Hey,
oh my God! I would be unbearable if Kyle Schwarber hit 265 next season. Absolutely unbearable.
Is it like sacrilegious to say that I'd kind of rather Kyle Schwarber hit 210 with like an 850 OPS than like 270 with like an 860 OPS just because I like the argument.
It's kind of
I like the people who don't understand. Like I like the people who would look at him at 260 with an 860 OPS and be like, that's a ball player. And the guys who would say like 205 batting average, 850 OPS and be like, get him off my team. I always like the Kyle Schwarber conversation.
Yeah. All right. What do you got here? So you have 3 more in the overs that we didn't talk about. I know one you're really confident about.
Yeah, the Brewers are kind of the team that I've been kind of pumping up all off season, and I know not fun. Their total's 76.5 for a reason. They sold Corbin Burns. They're like a soulless organization. They lost their GM, their manager's gone. But Corbin Burns is pretty much all they lost, like from the team. Like besides that, it was a 92 win team, and Corbin Burns did miss some time too at times. Like I think Milwaukee was better than just Corbin Burns. I don't think that they're going to get 17 games worse than they were last year. People are really expecting Milwaukee to kind of be a seller at the deadline. Usually, these like Midwest, Middle America, non-big market teams don't really tank. Like they don't fully sell. Like they're kind of content being an 80 to 82 win kind of team and hanging in there and getting their fans to come out for the summer and not really, keeping ticket, attendance, steady. I don't see Milwaukee as like a fully selling it situation. Like they just signed that deal with Woodruff to wait the year until Woodruff comes back from his injury. They signed a short-term deal with Rhys Hoskins that I don't think you'd sign if you weren't interested in competing at least. Like you have a lot of guys there with Milwaukee. Like you look at the roster and I think people are really kind of counting them out when the Central has almost become like, oh, are you picking the Cardinals? Are you picking the Reds? Or are you picking the Cubs? And I think the Brewers are right there. They've won 86 plus games in the last 6 seasons, or at least the last 6 full seasons. They're plus 800 to win a bad NL Central. I just think that's a crazy, crazy number. You still have Yelich at the top of the lineup, Contreras, Willy Adames, Rhys Hoskins. Obviously, we love him. And then you have a potential star upside in Jackson Chourio. Who you're hopefully going to play opening day one. As I know Yelich is kind of being vocal about that he wants him to play from day one. Freddie Peralta, who I think a lot of people look at as like a number 2, number 3, he's turned himself into like a top 15-ish pitcher. If you look at some fantasy baseball rankings, Miley and Junis pretty solid as a 2 and 3. You have the best closer in baseball probably in Devin Williams, or if not, top 5. You have a lot of guys. They're my pick to win the division. I think the Brewers win that division again, and I think it's going to surprise people.
I love it. Next, you have the Blue Jays. What do you got? Why? What are you thinking here?
To be honest, so I think the Yankees and Astros are the class of the AL. I think they're the 2 best teams, 2 best rosters. They're going to win those divisions. To me, Toronto, Baltimore, Seattle, Texas, I think are all the same. Like, I think they're all roughly exactly the same. The problem with that, there's only going to be 3 spots for those 4 teams. What I have Toronto, Baltimore, and Seattle all winning 91 games. And I have Texas winning 90 and missing the playoffs.
So I have a team that gets in the playoffs in the AL wins over 90.
Yeah. I think
other than your AL Central.
Maybe? Yeah, the Twins. I have the Twins at 87. I have the Twins down at 87 games. You look at
that's a loaded league.
You look at last year, that's how it played out because the Rangers got the last wild card spot at 90 wins to sneak into the playoffs.
Last wild card spot.
and the Blue Jays got left out with 89. I think Seattle got left out with 80, 88, if I'm not mistaken. Tampa was right there at 89, 90. I think it's going to be very similar. I have Texas winning the exact same amount of games as last year, but missing out on the playoffs. But the reason Blue Jays and Mariners are the lowest totals of those teams, both set at 86.5. And I don't really understand why. Like you look at the last couple of years for these teams who are pretty much roughly the same. The Blue Jays are like pretty much exactly the same, except they have Justin Turner instead of Matt Chapman. They've won 89, 92, and 91 games over the last 3 years. I feel like people are down on them because they haven't won in the playoffs. But this is still the same young team that's won 89 to 92 games 3 years in a row, and we're setting them at 86.5 in a division where I think the Rays and Red Sox both got worse than they at least have been over that stretch, over the breadth of that stretch. So I think Blue Jays over 86.5 is solid. And then Mariners, same kind of thing. They've won 88, 90, and 90 games over the last 3 years. Both of these teams have been consistent kind of in that range. So I think both teams will go over that 86.5 number.
Yeah. Let's move on to unders because I have some teams I really don't like this year. my first team's the Marlins. They added Tim Anderson today, which I think is a good move. I think if for that price, I think if Anderson can kind of find that again from what he had a few years ago, I think that's going to be a nice move for the Marlins. I still don't think that's going to really push them into a playoff race because any bit of it not working out just kind of tanks them. I just don't think the Marlins are. I think last year was kind of a fluke year. I think they were just kind of putting together a nice run of really close won games. And then if it wasn't close, they were kind of getting blown out. They obviously lost Alcantara for the whole season. Can you go a whole season with Jesus Luzardo and Braxton Garrett? I don't know. The Marlins are going to have to find that out. I don't really like any bit of this over. The under 78.5 for me right now is a play that I really like. And then the Red Sox. I just don't think the Red Sox are good. I think they're selling. I think they're going kind of towards this rebuild. I think it's just like Raffy and just kind of everyone else around them. I just think they're going to kind of have almost a disastrous year. Any sort of thing I've seen from big Red Sox names, every single tweet from Jared Carabas is just absolute, just in shambles. Like some comment from the owner saying that we'll get it eventually, or it's just something along those lines. This just has disastrous year written all over it for the Red Sox. I don't see really. I could probably name you like 3 good players on their baseball team right now. It's just not anything that I am going to write home about, especially at a total of 79.5. And then the Giants. I think we're both kind of on this Giants under. Just a team like we talked about earlier. I think they're going to be worse without Gabe Kapler as well. I think 81, maybe if they win 81, hey, that's fine. A 500 year for me is completely fine as long as it's not 82. But I don't think they're a good baseball team as well. I think they're just continually in this thing of they're going to try and go get these huge names and then they're going to get their hopes up and they're not going to come here. And until they make that really big splash, I think they're just going to be mediocre.
Yeah, I don't even think they're going to be mediocre. I'll save a little bit of a hot take for maybe to end the show, but the Giants, this is my favorite win total that I can really ever remember in the MLB, to be quite honest, is this Giants under 81.5. They've won 79 and 81 games the last 2 years with one of the best managers in baseball, in my opinion, in Gabe Kapler. And I know there's people that won't want to hear that, but the reason that this number is inflated is because they overperformed their roster and won 107 games in 2021 with Gabe Kapler. Before that, they went below 500 in the strike short in 2020. They won 77, 73, and 64 games in the years before that. They've went over 500 in one of the last 7 years. And it was the year that they won 107 games. The Giant, this is inflated because people remember 2021. People remember the 09 to 16 stretch, and they're like, "Oh, the Giants, consistent organization. They do things the right way. They win. They don't spend like the Dodgers." Like, people just like the Giants. I think this is always overinflated, and I think that they are going to really feel the wrath of losing Gabe Kapler. And I know that they added, Jorge Soler. I know that they added Jung-Hoo Lee from Japan. They added Jordan Hicks, who's going to be a starter for them. But look at their starting rotation. You got Logan Webb, who's a guy who's obviously very, very good. After that, Kyle Harrison, Jordan Hicks, Tristan Beck, Keston Wynn. What are we doing? Like, that's dumpster fire. That's brutal. That's brutal. And I will say, Camilo Doval, their closer, is, I think, like the nastiest pitcher in baseball.
Insanely gross.
He's just like the number one guy that anytime the Phillies play him, I watch him and I'm like, no one is getting a hit. This is impossible to hit. You cannot. I saw him in person one time and it took my breath away. He's unbelievable. But I don't get what the aim here is. Like, the bottom 4 of your lineup is Wilmer Flores, Mike Yastrzemski, Patrick Bailey, Marco Luciano. Like, that's got to be one of the worst bottom 4s in baseball. I'll chime in. The one that really the only thing we disagree with, because every over you said, even if I didn't give it or wouldn't take it, I have them over that number. And I agree with the Red Sox. I agree with the Giants. The only one we disagree on is the Marlins. I have the Marlins in the playoffs as my third wild card. And really, it's kind of just like a war of attrition in the middle of the NL. And if I'm low on San Fran, I think everyone's going to take Washington, Pittsburgh, Colorado out of the conversation before we even start. Like they're not playoff contenders. And then you take, the Mets out today with that Kodai Senga news. It definitely hurts things for them. You take the San Diego Padres out, who I'm going to talk about in a second, who I like they're under at 81.5. I'll just say it right now. It's pretty simple. They won 82 games last year, and they had Juan Soto and Josh Hader. They don't have those players now. I think that's going to hurt their baseball team.
Yeah, it's a little bit.
So that's why I like they're under 81.5. I have them at 75 wins. I don't think they're going to be good at all. So then it comes down to like the sixth wild card comes down to Miami or one of the Cubs, Cardinals, and Reds. I look through the Cubs, Cardinals, and Reds rosters. I don't see the upside that I see on the Marlins roster. I know that they've lost Sandy, but you look at the rotation, they at least have young guys that I think could take a leap. Like Luzardo, I think could take a step into being a full-on ace. Braxton Garrett's a guy who could take a step. Even lower on or lower down in that rotation, you have other young guys in Edward Cabrera who could take another step. You've got Yuri Perez, who for a stretch last year looked like the best pitcher in baseball. I mean, he had a month last year. He was unhittable. If he, looks like that for a longer sample size, I just think you have a lot of guys on this team who could be better than we've seen. Jake Berger, Jazz Chisholm. Like those are kind of young guys that could keep improving. So Miami, they're another one. Like if you rank offense, starting pitching, and bullpen, like I think they're top 6 or top 7 in the NL in all 3 categories, even if they're not great in any of the one category.
Yeah, so you said you want to kind of dig into this Padres, but really more the Angels. You kind of hit on that Padres already, and I think it's as simple as you said it.
Yeah.
If you win 81 games and you lose Juan Soto and Josh Hader, you're not going to win more than that the next season. Really, no matter who you add, because you lose a top 5 reliever in baseball and a top 5 player in baseball, you are not going to go over your win total.
How many guys would you say are definitively better than Juan Soto? Shohei? Is that it? Acuna.
If we're talking not playoffs, I'd probably say Mookie. Maybe. I would take Acuna.
Yeah, I take Acuna.
3.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think I take Soto over Mookie too. I'm just
that one's kind of pretty even for me.
Yeah, you could go either way.
But yeah, so I mean, granted, if you lose a top 5 reliever and a top 3 player in the entire league, you are probably not going to win more games than you did the season before. Now to the one that I think everyone kind of wishes wasn't the case, but there's a whole big hot topic on this right now. The Los Angeles Angels. Just an absolute dumpster fire out there. Just not doing anything. Anthony Rendon basically saying he hates baseball. Like Trout saying he's committed, but maybe he's not, but he is, but maybe it's just right now. Like, I don't know what the hell is going on out there, which I agree under on this Angels team.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the exact same thing I just said with the Padres. Like, they won 73 games each of the last 2 years with the MVP, like with Shohei Ohtani playing at an all-world historic pace, both pitching and hitting. So if everyone was right and he's the best player of all time and the most valuable player ever, I kind of think they should get worse. That's kind of what.
There's really no other way to put it.
I can't believe this number's at 72.5 when they won 73 games last year with Shohei. Like it's dumbfounding to me.
So let's do some player awards here. We can talk NL MVP. I think we both have our pick. I don't know if it's necessarily our favorite pick, like if you had a gun to your head with $1 million, who you would put the money on if it's that person. But based on odds, you have Corbin Carroll, 22-1. And I did and will be taking Bryce, 12-1. Do you just think it's going to be just another really good year from Carroll? Is it basically that next step after being on the biggest stage last year, or is it kind of just a mix of both?
Yeah, it's betting on a top notch prospect to take yet another step. I mean, he's had such a historic rookie season and 25 homers, 54 steals. Like, he has the potential of being like a 40-40 guy, I think, or, if he had 35 homers, 60 steals, or maybe even put up, with the steal numbers, but getting so crazy last year, maybe if he was even to get up to that 70 number. I mean, he played 155 and probably could have stole more. Wasn't like only got caught stealing 5 times. So if he wanted to be a little bit more aggressive, he could probably steal 70 bags, get the RBIs up. He had an 868 OPS. Like, I think that it's kind of just betting on such a high level prospect to take yet another leap when he's a great fielder, great hitting for power, great hitting for average, steals bags. Like, I think he can kind of just fill all the kind of metrics, and he was 5.4 WAR last year. So I think that could get a lot better. But if I was just picking, like, taking odds out of it, I think I actually would take Bryce. I think his power is going to really, really factor in, and I think he's going to hit 45 plus homers this year. Wow. I expect a big time power surge from a healthy Bryce playing first base, focusing on kind of the plate a little bit more. I think that all the Dodgers guys are going to kind of take away from each other with Mookie and Freeman and Shohei, and I'm probably forgetting someone, obviously, just right there. But I guess Will Smith, he's not really an MVP guy. But yeah. But Acuna is the big one. Obviously, Acuna has a great chance every year to win the award, but I think Bryce and Carroll are the two best prices at plus 1,200 and plus 2,200.
I love it. I think if you put Bryce out there for a full season, the last time he did that, he won the award. I think, like you said, I'm on Harper's over on home runs this year. The number was at like 30.5 when I saw it.
30.5.
30.5 was the last time I believe I saw it.
I like that a lot.
Yeah, that's a nice one too. I also, if I know you were saying the Trey Turner MVP possibly sprinkle something. Trey's over under, I saw at 23.5 for home runs. Trey went over that number after 4 of the worst months of his entire career.
That's fair.
So if that is a number I was liking as well. Next, we have Cy Young. You have an NL pick. I have an AL pick. I'm going to take Corbin Burnes 10-1. I think Burnes is obviously now in the Orioles, the definitive number 1 for the Orioles going into this season. I think anytime you put a really good pitcher on a really good baseball team, going from a mediocre team to a way better team than the Brewers, I think he's just going to have a better chance, honestly, because of the team he's on. And I think it's going to be a big year for Corbin Burnes. I think now going out to this Baltimore team, that if I am so high on Baltimore, he's going to have a good year for that win total to hit. I think it's a good number for him, plus 1,000. I think there were a few other guys that I was looking at in the AL. I think the obvious favorite right now is once again Garrett Cole. But I am liking that 10-1 number for Burnes.
Yeah, those are the two guys I was looking at in the AL. I think Garrett Cole's the obvious pick always. He's just so consistent. It's ridiculous. But Corbin Burnes, obviously, going to a new situation is always, I mean, he's an absolute stud. My favorite Cy Young bet on either side here was Zach Gallen. I think Zach Gallen's a guy who, you look at what he did last year, and he was a kind of a contender until he had a little bit of a tougher second half of the season. He still finished with a 3.47 ERA and better underlying numbers than that, with a 3.05 FIP. But his 2022 was absolutely insane. I mean, at 2.5 ERA, he had a 0.91 WHIP. Like, you take his last 2 years, he's probably been the best pitcher in baseball, or at least in the NL, over that 2-year stretch. So I think Zach Gallen, getting him at 16-1, Zach Gallen is not the 7th best pitcher in the NL. And so right now on odds, at least on DraftKings, guys ahead of him, Strider, fair. Wheeler, fair. But I don't know. I think Gallen probably has a better chance at winning a Cy Young.
I mean, granted, if you gave me Zach Wheeler 16-1, I would take it.
I might take Gallen before it. I think Gallen might be a little bit better of like a regular season, kind of a dominant guy. But Wheeler would be the guy I'd want in the playoffs.
Wheeler's just like that consistently.
Yes.
Great, like not flashy though. Gallen is the great and flashy, at
Wheeler's,
least in the regular season.
Wheeler's probably a safer bet at this point to be top 10, but I think Gallen's a safer bet to be top 1 or top 2, or at least in the NL top 1. But the other guy, like that's at least debatable. Yamamoto is above him in odds. That feels disrespectful at this point. Logan Webb is above him in odds. That feels disrespectful. Max Fried is above him in odds. What are we doing?
That's crazy. That's crazy.
And then Justin Steele is above him in odds, which that's based on 1 year. Like Zach Gallen's had that year except twice, basically. Like, and that's not to mention having solid years before that. Obviously, 275 in 2020, 281 in limited games in 2019 in Miami and Arizona combined. Zach Gallen, I think, is just a stud.
Yeah. Last pick here. Yeah,
go ahead. Sprinkle in Sonny Gray at 40-1.
I love that.
If you want to get crazy, 40-1.
I like that. New team, last American League MVP. An absolutely loaded league. Just pretty absurd right now. Just the amount of players that are playing in the American League now that have the chance to win this award. Just to name a few. Aaron Judge, Juan Soto, Yordan Alvarez, Corey Seager, Julio Rodriguez, Kyle Tucker, Mike Trout, Adley, Gunnar, all competing to win the same award. I think it's going to be one of the better MVP races we've seen. But based off of the number, I have to go double check this number because I saw it on one book and it is completely off on another book. So I just want to make sure I wrote this number down correctly because that seems kind of absurd. Give me 1 second. League winners. Here we go. Awards. American League MVP. Yes. So Adley Rutschman is my pick. DraftKings, he's 13-1. I got him at 25-1 on FanDuel. I think that is a pick. Like I said earlier, Adley's only going to get better. And I think he is going to have a massive year. He hit 20 home runs, 80 RBIs last year. I think you see that home run number go up. I'm all over that over home run total. He's at 19.5 for this year. I'm all over that. 809 OPS, 131 OPS plus his rookie year, 128 OPS plus last year. I think the Adley train is just going to keep going. And I think it's going to hit hard this year. So I think really just based on those odds, I think that's a great number for Adley, 25-1 right now. So I think that's going to be my American League MVP bet.
I think it's just so hard for catchers because they have to take days off and it's so easy to get dinged up. But Adley, if anyone's going to do it, it's going to be Adley for sure. He's the best catcher in baseball, which is crazy to say at such a young age. Sorry, JT. But it's over. It's over.
It's not close.
DCIB's over. It stinks. But my favorite player award is actually this one. Vladdy AL MVP plus 2250. He has not been one of the best players in baseball the last 2 years at all, Vladdy, to be quite honest. But when you have a season like Vladdy did in 2021, it kind of he's still, let me check the age real quick. He's 24 years old. Like I'm not willing to give up on a guy.
He's only 24 years old.
It's insane. It feels like he's been in our lives forever. That's 5 full years.
He's been in the league for 10 years.
And honestly, do you think about look at the games here? 123 games got brought up mid-season 2019. 60 games in the 60-game season in 2020, 161, 160, 156. Like, the guy does not miss games. Like, he plays every day. So that's especially why it feels like, we've just watched him play so much. That year in 2021 just gets forgotten about because he came in second for MVP because Shohei was so good. But he had 123 runs, 48 homers, 111 RBIs, a 601 slugging percentage, which led the league, 401 OBP, led the league, 1,002 OPS, led the league. Like, he led the league in total bases.
Dude, that's like a Ryan Howard season.
He also got a Gold Glove. Like, I did not know Vladdy was a Gold Glove fielder at all. Like, you look at his grading out. He looks like he's probably above average and maybe got a little bit home cooking there with a Gold Glove. But I mean,
how many good first basemen are there really at defense?
Yeah, no, there's not that many. There really isn't that many, which is why the Reese Hoskins stuff was always insane. But anyway, I digress. But
neither here nor there.
Yeah, neither here nor there. But even the last 2 years in these big down years, 97 RBIs, 94 RBIs, like he had 58 homers in the 2-year stretch there. I just think when you have a year as good as he had in 2021, I'm just always going to consider you as a possibility to get back to that level. And plus 2250 just feels far too low.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's 2 good numbers for Adley and Vladdy. Last thing, I know we talked about this. Final hot take. Hot take going into the season. I have mine. I can go first unless you know yours. You can kick it off.
You can go first.
All right. I believe Bryce Harper and Trey Turner are both going to finish top 5 in MVP. I think the Harper thing is real this year. I think this is his award again this year. And I think Trey's just going to have a really, really solid year. I think that typical Trey Turner consistency is going to come back as it was in previous years. I think he's just going to be a consistently great player for us again this year. I think the defense is going to be a lot better than it was last year. There's not going to be as many errors. He's already said that it's been something he's worked on all off season. I can't see the defense being any worse than what it was last year. God, I hope it's not. But right now, yeah, for me, top 5 MVP, I think will consist of Bryce Harper and Trey Turner.
I like it. I like that a lot. Yeah, plus 1,600 is worth a sniff there for Trey for sure. My hot take, I went double here because I don't know how hot either take is really. So I have 2 for you. My first one I already gave out. Brewers going to win the NL Central. They're over under 76.5. They're plus 800 to win the division. I went through all the reasons why already, but go look at the Cubs. They've gotten worse from last year when they completely collapsed and missed the playoffs. The Cardinals went out and got a bunch of AARP members. They got a bunch of 50-year-olds in their starting rotation with Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson. The Reds, they didn't really do anything. They got young talent, but without, and maybe those guys just get way better and they jump like we've seen, Baltimore and other teams do.
That's all about Hunter Green this year for me.
It's all about that whole rotation. Like that, you don't know what you're getting. Lodolo, Hunter Green, like Ashcraft, like
Kyle Gibson now in that rotation.
No, he's in St. Louis.
St. Louis.
Yeah. And Abbott, too, is another young guy in Cincinnati. Like, their entire rotation is just young dudes who we don't know what they are yet. Like, and they've been really kind of volatile. We've seen good stuff and bad stuff from all of them. So I just think Milwaukee is going to hang around there. I think they're going to end up winning that division. But my real hot take, I think San Francisco wins less than like 6. I think they win like 65 games or less. Like I think this is going to be a team that completely bottoms out. Logan Webb's on the trade, on the trade block at the deadline potentially. Maybe Soler, who they just signed, is on the trade block. Conforto, a couple other guys in that lineup. I just think San Fran completely falls off the face of the earth. I think they're going to compete for being one of the worst teams. Besides Oakland, who doesn't count. There's 29 baseball teams in the Oakland A's, but I think they have a chance to be the 29th worst team. I really do think San Fran can be that bad.
Would you consider sprinkling any money on the Giants to win the least amount of games?
No, because Oakland exists.
Is that Oakland's award?
Yeah, that's the problem. I have Oakland at 49 wins.
Oh, God.
49. They won 50 last year. Like, I'm not even being that crazy. They look worse than they did last year. And they had some guys who probably overperformed, like Brent Rooker, who was not as good down the stretch. Like, Oakland's bad, man. They don't deserve to be in the league. They should be contracted.
Bad team. Absolute dumpster fire. Well, Mark, thank you. Thank you for joining. Unless you have any final thoughts, I think we're done here.
Yeah, my final thought is contract the A's until Vegas can let them move in. Like this whole thing now, they're gonna have like 3-4 years where we don't know like where they're gonna belong, and then they'll be in Vegas. Like they were supposed to be 2027. Now it's not gonna be like till like 2029 or something. Like they're gonna have to figure this out. Like just get rid of them for a couple of years. We'll be fine.
Just give them like 3 years off. Cut everybody. Put them on new teams. Let them get a new opportunity. Figure it out again in 4 years. And then we will play with 29 teams until this rumored expansion comes. But with that, this has been another episode of Luke and I on the Phillies, brought to you by In the Clutch. Use code Arcaini Luke at your checkout for 10% off. For Mark Henry Jr., I am Luke Arcaini, and we will talk to you next time.